Welcome to Yeukai Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. It's Trevor Stockwell here with you today. Now, before I introduce our guest, you all know that one of the areas that we focus on in the show is relationships, because we realize that getting relationships right is crucial to our success and well-being, both professionally and personally. And our guest today, Alexandra, she's an MD, but she's shifted her focus and is now a relationship and intimacy coach. She helps couples build beautiful, stable, long-lasting, sexy relationships. She's written a book, Uncompromising Intimacy, which we're definitely going to dig into and talk about. And she creates several programs. One of them is called Aligned and Hot Marriage Program. I like that one. Maybe I didn't do that justice in the announcement, but you can find out more about it in a minute. She's also started a podcast. So lots we could say and share, but I'm going to introduce her now and let her start. So welcome, Alexandra Stockwell.
Thank you so much. It's so fun to be here and figure out that we have the same last name. It's a fine beginning for our conversation.
Absolutely. Yes, we should just point out that as far as we know, we're not related, but, you know, who knows? But yes, she's on here because she's an expert, not because she's my sister or relative or whatever. So, yeah, just to get that clear, that's fine. Maybe let's just start with some of your journey. So you started off, well, maybe not started off as a doctor, but you were a doctor, still are, but you have changed your focus. Tell us a little bit of kind of the journey of Alexandra that's got you to where you are now.
Great. So in high school, in college, in university, and in medical school, and then in my training, I was always very focused. I certainly had my fun afternoon every now and then, but everything that I was doing was with the aim to become a successful practicing physician. And I had goals in my personal life as well. And in my mid-30s, I had achieved them all. I had my own small holistic medical practice north of Boston in Massachusetts, and I was married to the man I just love so much. We had 3 of our 4 children. I had paid off all of the debt that I acquired in order to become a physician and open my practice. And I thought I should feel satisfied. I had put really 2 decades of attention into creating this life, and now I should be able to really appreciate it. And while my life was good and successful in all the ways that I've shared, and I certainly wasn't depressed or even remotely burnt out, I could hear this whisper of not being contented, of a kind of internal emptiness. And I just knew that I wasn't going to live that way for another 3, 4, 5 decades. And so I really found the courage to take a sabbatical, which is a very unusual thing for a physician to do. But I took a sabbatical and I gave myself permission to just do what I felt like doing, what struck my fancy. And I took a dance class, I took some art classes. I used to go and sit by the river for no reason other than that I felt like it. And from there, all this new inspiration and meaning emerged, and one thing led to another. And I took a training in sensuality and sexuality for my own purposes. I wanted to bring passion and a kind of spark into my marriage. And this training that I did happened to simultaneously be a training for coaches. And at the time, I really didn't know what a coach was. This was a while ago. And I thought, well, I'm here. I'm a very good student. I should go to the learning lab for the coaching. And when I did, I just fell in love, because in relationship and intimacy coaching, I'm able to do my favorite things that I did in medicine and none of the things that were my less favorite things.
Wow, that's amazing. It's interesting how you kind of unravel that, because yeah, like you say, you kind of hit a pinnacle in your career that you'd got everything sorted, but it just wasn't making you happy, wasn't making you smile when you get up in the morning. And that takes courage to then move to embrace something completely different. But I'm glad you have, because you can share a lot of your expertise with us to help us, whether people are listening and they're single, whether they're married, whether they're in business and they're thinking, why are we listening to relationships? The reason, thankfully, that you're going to help us is because relationships affect every part of our lives, don't they? The business side of it, with our bosses or with suppliers, potential clients, and then when we get home, is it working at home? So yeah, there's lots of areas we can dig into. Maybe is the best
Actually, I'd like to express that I forget whose quote this is, but I really love how it's expressed. There really is no problem in business. There's no business problem. There are only relationship problems. Because when it comes to business, it's easy to figure out if there's some strategy, it can be handled. But when it comes to anything that really challenges us in business, invariably, it involves a relationship that isn't working out the way we need it to.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, well said. So what are maybe some of the things then that we can embrace or change so that we start to build more stable and passionate relationships, be at home and in the workplace? What are some of the things that you share with your clients?
Well, first off, in this context, it's very important for anyone listening to keep in mind that what is happening in your professional life, in your business, or if you're still in a corporate position or you're an established entrepreneur, this applies either way, that what is happening in your business, it is showing up and impacting your relationship at home. And that is true if you share your home with someone you're in a relationship with, and it's true if you're alone as well. And likewise, whatever your personal situation is, whether you're lonely, whether you're happily alone, whether you're married or not, what is happening for you during the off hours is influencing and reflected in what is happening at work. And it's easy to understand this just in terms of mood. Like if you live in a toxic environment or you don't feel supported in your home, that undermines how creative, how devoted, and how successful you can be at work, and vice versa. There's very interesting data to show that people who are happily married earn more money. And it isn't just because I don't know, whatever one might think. I personally believe it's because when an individual feels the support and the encouragement and the gratification and the delight in a relationship, you just have more courage to take risks and more confidence, more conviction, all of which contributes positively to what is happening in business. So I wanted to just start by laying out the landscape. There's nothing about this which is irrelevant if you want to impact more people and make more money.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. It's like, if it's not working at home, we take the emotional baggage issues of that into our business interactions and relationship as well, don't we? And we're not going to hit our peak performance if our mind's thinking about a conversation we had just before we left the house or something like that, or whatever the scenario might be. I think, yeah, what you said there is really key.
And I think it's interesting that we can really understand that when it's not working. And I want to talk about how to make it work. And so one of the things, and I'm going to talk first to women who may have a male partner, and whatever your situation is, if you have a partner or not, you can see how what I'm going to say would apply. But typically, I'll speak for myself as a wife. It's very easy when my husband comes home and shares something about his work day that I notice the thing that I'm going to be judgmental about and critical. Like, oh, these 10 things went well, but I'm going to say, what about that 11th thing? This is a very common phenomenon in communication, that kind of like the children's activity with books. You know, you look at a picture book and say, what is different on this page compared to the other pages? We're used to picking out what doesn't match. And we often do that in our communication. And it means instead of affirming the majority of things that are going well, we have follow-up questions and want to understand and make suggestions about the things that aren't going well. And when that is our primary way of communicating, the people we're communicating with feel the questioning energy much more than the supportive energy. And one of the most powerful things is to become your partner's biggest fan, or become your friend's biggest fan. Because if someone is confiding in you about what is going on in their professional life, if you respond in a way that is really encouraging instead of skeptical, that person will then be able to go to work with more success, more inspiration. And even if someone at work is questioning them, they'll feel the power of your support kind of as wind in their sails. So that's something that you can give to other people, and look for ways to create that for yourself, because it just makes a difference. If people believe in us, we go further when that happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And I think from, maybe I won't say this for all the guys out there, but from a male perspective, just naturally we're wired to fix things, aren't we? So if the shoe's on the other foot as such, your wife comes home, tells you how tough it's been or had a bad conversation, whatever, we automatically suggest something because we want to make her feel good, but we want to fix the problem because that's what we do. And it takes kind of control, discipline, and awareness to step back and listen, nod, and just listen some more, amongst other things. So yeah, no, I think that's really key. We do it without meaning to, but you're right. We send the wrong message to the other person that we really don't want to send. Partly
Yes.
through curiosity, I suppose, but also, yeah, it's not being intentional about being different to that, isn't it? I think that's a key element.
Yeah, and it's usually well-meaning. However, this is a pattern that can sort of have a life of its own. And what I recommend is, to any listener, when you're telling someone, a spouse, a friend, a parent, a stranger in a coffee shop, when you're telling someone about something related to your business endeavors, before you begin sharing, tell the person with kindness. You don't need to be bossy, but with kindness and consideration, tell the person what kind of a response you would like. If you would like problem solving, go ahead and ask that. The person listening probably is going to be very glad to give it. That's the easiest. If what you want is just that they listen without really responding, but still pay attention and hold space, well, that's harder to offer. But if you ask, you are so much more likely to get it than if you don't say that. Or maybe you'd like someone to say, no matter what you share, to tell you you're doing a good job. It requires self-awareness and clarity of your own desire and need. But if you put the time into figuring out what that is, and then request it before you share, that conversation is going to serve you so much better.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that is I just need to unpack this in front of you and with you. Can you just listen and, don't jump in, don't try and fix it, but I need you to listen. Yeah, I think that's really good.
One thing I tell my clients, which people wouldn't infer at all, is that this is especially if you're talking to someone you talk to a lot, because it's your spouse or a best friend, it is a real treat to say, look, I only need 20% of your attention, or I only need 50% of your attention, because we're so used to demanding 100% attention from our listeners. And if they give us less, we feel offended. But do yourself a favor. If you really just want to be able to talk something through, you don't need someone to catch all the details, give them permission to just give you 40% of your attention, and the conversation will be much more satisfying for both of you.
Yeah, no, that's good. And for the person that is listening, it's learning to listen for the emotion more than the words that are being said, isn't it, really? I think, regardless of what's being said, is like, are they handling it well? Are they about to break down? Or, what's the best way that we can listen? So, no, that's really good. How about emotional intimacy? So you've written your book, Uncompromising Intimacy. Is that referring to emotional intimacy? Is there another element to it? Tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I'd love to lay the landscape. So throughout the world, this is especially true in Western countries, but throughout the world, the most common relationship advice that is given is that you need to learn to compromise. If you want to have a good marriage, you have to be expert at compromising. If you want a good business partnership, well, if you're truly partners, then you need to learn to compromise. Often there's a hierarchy and it's not necessary. One person's in charge. But by and large, for emotional relationships, learning to compromise is considered the key. And I think that is completely wrong when it comes to marriage. Because if you learn to compromise and you just don't bring something up and you say, yes, you'd be happy to go for Italian food when you'd really like to have Chinese, and you'd really prefer to paint the bathroom this blue, but your partner likes that blue, so you say, okay. There are so many ways that are big in terms of living in the city versus the country, and ways that are small in terms of which pair of earrings you wear. I mean, it can be so small, but when we are in the habit of compromising in this way and essentially putting our partner's comfort over our own desire, when we get to the bedroom, there's no switch to flip. In order to be passionate and self-expressed and available for the full breadth of romantic connection and sensuality, if we are compromising throughout our everyday, we don't have access to the fullness of our uncompromising, unapologetic, magnificent selves, which are what are needed to really experience marital passion.
Yeah, that is so good. And you're right. It's not been spoken about and mentioned enough, really, has it? It has, from my side of things. All I've heard really is it's give and take, and you have to can't expect everything. And I guess wrapped up in all of that is learning to communicate in such a way that you can literally communicate. You're not demanding, but you're communicating. Actually, I'd like to say about this, and this is really good for me. How does it feel for you, kind of thing? I really don't want to live my life, like you say, kind of boxing myself into the approval of what you want, but also I don't want to be the domineering person that demands everything and doesn't listen to your side of the story either. There is, I don't know, how do we manage that?
It's a really beautiful question, because I think most people intuitively know what it means to prioritize the partner's needs and desires and hold back. And it seems like the alternative is becoming a dominating bully. And when I talk about being uncompromising, people at a superficial understanding will think I mean that they should become more dominant. That's not the case at all. And I'm not talking in the context of a toxic relationship or with a narcissist. I'm talking about two good people who love one another and want to have more sparkle and passion and depth of emotional connection. And in that scenario, it's important to share the fullness of what you want and invite and be in acceptance of what the other person wants, and then you work it out from there. The thing about compromise is that you end up kind of clipping your communication, so you never fully express what you want. And if, for example, if we go to the Italian and Chinese food example, it might be that your partner loves Italian food and just doesn't enjoy the flavors of Chinese food, and you are good with both. So then you always end up going to Italian. Well, if you just never say you want Chinese food, that ends up being compromising, and you're habituating yourself to hold back. But if what you say is, I love how much you enjoy Italian food. I do too. But every now and then, I'd really like to have Chinese food. So let's build it in that you come with me for Chinese every now and then, or I'll make a point of going and eating it myself just to get those flavors I'm yearning for. And for your partner, that is communicated with freedom. It's not looking to make your partner want Chinese food too. It's just honoring the fullness and not restricting how many concerns are being considered.
Yeah. No, that's good. As you were kind of saying that, just thinking through what would be, because you're here and you're an expert, I get the opportunity to kind of dig into your expertise, which I'm sure will help other people as well. But maybe in that scenario, let's say, my wife loves Italian, always wants to eat Italian, never wants to eat anything else. I then say, hey, the last 9 times out of 10 we've ate Italian, I'd love to go for a Chinese. If she then, as long as I've communicated it well, if she then responds, I ain't going, it's good, Italian or nothing. What is some of what's the best way for me to respond? Does that flag up there's something else that's happening in the relationship which I'm not aware of, which is causing that sort of response that I need to think about and talk about? Or if they're not generally like that, if they become, like you say, the toxic side of it, where it is a one-sided, that's a separate question really. But maybe just, is it learning to dig past the initial response to think, actually, it might be something else? What is it that I didn't do earlier, which I know really bugs her, and I just didn't think of it? Could that be boiling under the surface that's then come out in this response? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. It's actually a sophisticated question, and all relationships benefit tremendously, and many of them require curiosity, genuine curiosity. So not being uninterested on the one hand, not interrogating on the other, but just asking. So in the scenario that you've described, instead of treating your wife's response as, no, I'm not going to Chinese, it's Italian or nothing, instead of treating that as the end of the conversation, treat it as the beginning of a remarkable and open-ended conversation. You have no idea where it's going to go. And the first thing to do is to respond with a question, or say, well, I'm glad you've told me where you stand. What is it about, I can think of so many different questions just right off the bat, and I'm going to give an example. I'm going to say some of them, but what I want to emphasize is that every single one is an open-ended question, meaning it's not a simple yes or no. It's not that an answer is right or wrong. It's just a question to get to know this woman more. So the possible questions might be, what do you love so much about Italian? Or, why don't you like Chinese? Have you had a bad experience? Or, it really depends. It could be that she once ate Chinese food and someone teased her about it when she was a child. It could be that, I don't know, if she had allergies, you would know. It could be that she really wants to go salsa dancing and you keep refusing. And if you would just be open to trying salsa dancing, then she would be open to going to other kinds of restaurants. Like there's so much possibility. There's so much joy and connection that are possible following, I'm not going to Chinese, it's Italian or nothing. If you respond with questions and create the invitation to find out what's really going on underneath.
Yeah, that's really helpful, actually. Yeah, in lots of, I'm sure everyone listening are nodding and kind of, yeah. Hopefully, I find that useful.
Well, I do want to add one thing.
Yeah.
Because the example you've given, which was so good, was when there's a problem. And curiosity is wonderful for a problem. It's also wonderful in a time of conflict. If you and another person, whether it's your spouse or someone else, are really butting heads and seeing things differently, if you just take a breath and ask a question, and I don't mean the kind of question which is meant to further your perspective, but just really to try to see it from the other person's point of view, that curiosity paves the way for connection and collaboration. However, what I also want to say is you don't need a problem to benefit from all the riches that come from being curious. When I coach couples, I often encourage them to make a point of just including more open-ended questions in their everyday interactions, particularly questions you haven't asked before. Because one of the things which is so wonderful, whether it's a business relationship, a friendship, or a marriage, is that when you know someone well, you know someone well, and you can anticipate their responses, and there's a comfort and a safety in that. But everyone is always growing, and you miss out on the further development. So you might ask questions like, what was the most challenging part of your day today? Or if you could have dinner with a celebrity, who would it be and what would you ask? Or what do you daydream about these days? If you're newly in love with someone, that might be a question you'd be asking, or you'd be hearing the answer. But if you've been with someone for 5, 10, 30 years, you're probably not asking, what do you daydream about? So bring back those kinds of questions. Or when was the first time that you really felt proud of what you can accomplish? I have a personal favorite, which I absolutely do not recommend starting with, only after you've really become skillful with both answering and asking questions. But I love asking, when was the last time you told a white lie? It's just inviting a part of someone into the relationship, which is typically held back. And I want to make sure to add that if you're listening and then you adopt a stance to cultivate curiosity and really ask questions that can be playful, profound, factual, any kind of question, whichever kind suits you in the moment. Even if your partner doesn't ask you questions, go ahead and reveal more of yourself without waiting for your partner to ask the questions, because when you reveal your answers, that builds more connection as well. You don't need to wait to be asked or given permission.
That's really good. Thank you. Yeah, I like that. I think it's kind of like personal growth, isn't it? Like, unless we're intentional about growing and developing ourselves, who we are, becoming better people, relationships can be very stagnant, can't they? If there's not continual effort. And like you say, curiosity, kind of cultivating like an exploring kind of perception about things. We just, this is it. I know you, you know me. And the whole thing kind of stagnates to the point where there's no life in it. We're just kind of living together, but we're not growing together. And I think, yeah, that's such a tragedy to get to that point. And I think, yeah, it's really key that if we do develop that curiosity and kind of start asking, maybe the first thing, if people aren't in that position, is, hey, I'm going to get more curious. So I might suddenly ask you some curious questions, because otherwise there's that, what's going on? Why, the whole suspicion comes up. But if you, like you say, communicate it to start with, just, I want to think about stuff differently. I want to explore more. Can I ask you some questions? And then, yeah, go in with the open-ended questions, because that's really what, that's the benefit of coaching, isn't it? That's kind of like the secret weapon of coaching, in a sense of, it gets us to think about stuff that we just won't every day stop and think about. We get so caught up in the busyness, the routine, the comfortable kind of, yeah, this is the area that I know, this is how I operate. Let's not rock the boat because this is kind of safe. But it's like, no, we don't grow like that, do we? Life doesn't stay interesting like that. It really is, let's learn stuff, let's ask questions, let's think about stuff we've never thought about before. Yeah, that's really...
You put that so well, and that is also the definition of being an entrepreneur, is needing to grow and navigate things in different ways. And there's no way to be successful as an entrepreneur without embodying some of what you've described. The fact is, it's not possible to have a really juicy, nourishing, passionate relationship without embodying that as well. It's just that so many people don't, and have, quote, successful relationships, which really are stagnating. And so I want to add 2 tips to the things that you've just said.
Yeah.
If you're not in the habit of asking questions of your business partner, your spouse, somebody else important in your life, I really like what you said about how to introduce it. And I would add, start with something affirming and positive, like, I love you so much. I'm so grateful for our marriage. And I want to bring a little bit more. I want to just bring more to it. Or I feel like I want to get to know you anew. So just something positive makes it feel good, rather than, wait, why is she asking? And the other thing that I want to add is that there really is an art to being curious, and there's a skill, and it's a very vulnerable thing to share responses to questions that haven't been shared before. So while learning to do this, if you're the person asking, it is so important to be a yes to whatever the response is. Even if the response is, I don't really know. Don't turn that into a failure. It takes practice. So maybe if someone says that, you can respond by saying, well, think about it and let me know. And then just back off, but ask another question the next day. Because people who are adults are not used to having that kind of personal attention.
Yeah.
And it takes some getting used to. And you need to keep asking, keep being interested. Don't be judgmental and dismissive in order to make it safe for the true answers to be shared with you. You need to be a good listener as well as a good question asker. And when you do, you will have the secret sauce to create emotional connection and a kind of intimacy that, if you're in a romantic relationship, paves the way to the bedroom kind of intimacy. And if you're in a business partnership, it leads to more trust and more collaboration. And you both have access to more fulfillment and connection when you're taking risks rather than doubting one another. It's incredibly profound. Questions cost no money, and they bring incredible results.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really good. It's kind of, I think we are very rapidly running out of time, so I do need to kind of wind this up a little bit. But just, I think as we grow up, shall we say, we lose the wonder of life. We stop asking the what ifs, I think, and just get into the, this needs to happen, let's get on with it kind of thing. And you're right, it's like, re-spark that questioning, that thinking about it. I think that's really good. I did want to kind of ask you briefly about your podcast as well, before we wrap this up, because you've recently started a podcast, is that right?
Yeah, it's my second podcast. I started it on Valentine's Day this year, and I guess I'll just say that the main way that mammals learn is through imitation. And so one of the reasons that so many people have relationships which, even if they're good, could be so much better is because we don't have examples of truly fantastic relationships to be inspired by and learn by. If you want to be great at golf, well, there's Tiger Woods. If you want to be an amazing entrepreneur and innovator, there's Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, whomever it is. But when it comes to a magnificent relationship, whom do we turn to? So the marriage podcast, some of it is my sharing my stories of my clients, and much of it is me interviewing couples who have dynamic, incredible relationships, who've learned how to be curious and far more than that. And the marriage podcast is really my offering so that if anyone wants a better relationship, you get some inspiration and some idea of what that might look like for you.
Wow, that's really good. Yeah. So whoever's listening, wherever you are in your relationship, whatever stage you're at, whether you feel you've lost hope that it's not going to get any better, whether things are really good and you want to make it even more steamy, more interesting, however you want to put that. There's always something we can do, isn't there? There's always hope. And I could talk to you for hours, Alexandra. I really could. This has been so much fun. What's the best way for them to touch base? They can catch your podcast, which is called
The Marriage Podcast. It's on all the platforms.
Perfect.
And I also want to just emphasize the name of my book. It's Uncompromising Intimacy. It's available on Amazon and Audible. It's short. The first chapter's on curiosity, and I have a number of other chapters, and each one has a tip that's really easy to implement. And it's focused on married couples, but some of my absolute favorite testimonials are single people who've used these same communication methods in other relationships. It will take you very far. I'm also on Facebook, on Instagram, alexandra.stockwell.intimacy. I'm on Clubhouse, and my website is alexandrastockwell.com. If you reach out, I personally will respond. I love connecting with people. If there's something you've heard today that touched you, if you'd like to work together, I'm really happy to be in connection with people and focus on relationships together.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you for all of that. It's just so many good things just in the last 30 minutes or so that we've chatted together. So thank you for sharing that. It's just a good dose of hope and very practical things that we can, if we've not thought about, or we've maybe tried it in the past and then just got distracted and forgotten about it, we can put stuff into practice straight away. So maybe the next conversation you have with your significant other or your business partner, just think about how you communicate, how you listen, maybe ask open-ended questions with them as well. Explore what is it that they want out of a business partnership.
I really want to encourage people to try it. This is something that I've given talks about and spoken on podcasts, and I'm continually both surprised and not surprised that someone will hear this and go home and have a conversation they never expected. It's so much better just by asking a question. It's like salt that makes all the food taste better. So try it.
Absolutely. Yep, there's some wise words there, definitely. Yeah, and reach out to Alexandra as well. Why not book a session and see where it goes? Can't do any harm, definitely not. Thank you again for everything that you've shared. Thank you for being who you are and the wisdom and the value that you give to so many people, and for writing the book and for sharing your time with us today. I've really enjoyed it. I'm sure everybody listening will as well. And yes, we urge you to put things into practice. Don't let this just go to your head. Let it go down into your heart and then out through your actions. That's when it makes a real difference. So it would be amazing if you could come back again at some point and we can dig into more of it. But what you shared today has been amazing. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you so much, Trevor. I'd love to be back, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And for everybody listening, yes, there'll be a link to the website below. Jump on the website, have an exploration round, grab the book. Whatever it is you feel that is a good fit for you right now, take action and do something positive. You'll be glad you did. And we're going to sign off for now, but thanks for joining us. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to Yeukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yukaibusinessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18 or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.